analyzes clinicians with the help of few pathologists, the anemias. How it makes a difference to us, on the basis of automation, we can take certain therapeutic, diagnostic, and follow-up decisions. And also a little bit on thrombocytopenia. I'm also going to do something on leukocytosis, but as part of malignancy. Whenever we talk of automation, no one will go forward without paying homage to this gentleman, Wallace Colter, who is the one who designed the Colter principle, on which somewhere or the other most companies try to use it. It's amazing. I've been mostly working on Colter, but I've been exposed to the other instruments also. It's apparent that you get two types of answers from automated CBC machine. I'm saying automated because I'm sure now most of us have gone to automation, no one's doing manual counting now. The whole idea of using automation is because it is rapid, reliable, reproducible, and therefore it lends a lot of accuracy and credence to your reports. It reduces your errors and helps the clinician accept the reports much more than a manual account. Still, when I come to the topic of thrombocytopenia, the manual counting of platelets is relevant. And therefore, everything is not automated. A pair of trained eyes behind the microscope also makes a lot of difference. So that aspect also will come down. From any machine that you run a CBC on, you are going to get two values. One which are measured directly by a machine, and one which is derived on the basis of these measured values. And they are shown to you in front of you in this tabulated graph. Along with the CBC, usually you get some graphs, scattergrams and scatter plots or whatever you want to call it. And most Paul pathologists here, or their clinicians also.
No.
One of the things that come to light is that the pathologist will give out a report to a clinician, and the clinician will then read it. If an interpretation has been given by the pathologist on that CBC report, the clinician will act accordingly. But many times that interpretation is not given. Many times the graphs are not issued. Sometimes the graphs are issued. So when I talk to the clinical side, they say that graphs are given, we don't understand it, there is no interpretation. And I speak to the pathology side, they say, but we don't have any history, what interpretation? So somehow, as pathologists, you will have to put your foot down and say that, look, we will not issue a report without there being clinical details given to us. If the report is normal, you don't need clinical details, which I believe 75% of the time is going to be normal in most of the standalone pathology laboratories. The hospital-based pathology laboratory, 75% going to be abnormal. But either which way, I think, as a rule, you should not issue a report without having clinical. And this is at the cost of you being a little bit, not rude, but forthright on the phone or some form of communication with the clinician. Say that, give us details, we'll give you more information. You can't do it. It is then that the numbers that come up on the CBC is interpreted by both together so that the patient gets the maximum benefit. Otherwise, there's so much lack of communication between two sides, you don't get answers. Patient suffers. Any test that you do, CBC is not anything different than a test which is routinely done. Please remember the following things which I always communicate to my clinical colleagues and also to pathologists that no test is perfect. Number two, choose a test which will give you the best answer for that problem. I know there are some general practitioners who ask me after doing a CBC, what is the blood sugar? It's true. The concept is blood has been taken and now you should give all answers. See, that is the concept here. Number three, anything that is abnormal, it is wise to recheck. Not from the same sample, but from a newly drawn sample. Because the same sample might have a clot, you run it again, you might get a similar answer. Preferably a fresh sample should be taken. But the amount of doctor shopping that goes on, there's a lot of lab shopping also. So from one lab, उसने अच्छा report नहीं दिया next. So the test is done there, you will never know whether you are right or wrong. So somehow we should, as clinicians, I keep telling them that we should do it in the same lab. Maintain the quality control. So all the mistakes in the lab remains constant. So my reports of the same patient from that lab will always be constant. And that is better than making go from one place to another. It's just unfair. Values outside the normal range do not always mean disease. An example I tell you, suppose the patient's hemoglobin is 9.5. That is abnormal. And the patient says, sir, other than this report, I got no problem. I go to work every day. I climb 3 sets of stairs. I go to the station. I have to cross the staircase of the platforms, which I think is one of the hallmarks of how fit you are. So I can do that. So I'm fine with that also. But as far as CBC is concerned, he is anemic, as per definition. When you do investigation, you find out that this person is thalassemia minor. So for all practical purposes, this person is anemic. But for thalassemia minor is considered to be a normal. In our country, the hemoglobin for a thalassemia minor varies between 9 and 11. So that is normal. It's like being 13 and a half or 14 for an adult male who does not have thalassemia. So just because there's anemia, that does not mean he's abnormal. He's got a hereditary problem. And we should treat him like a normal person. Values outside the normal range always don't mean that there's no disease. So values inside the normal range don't always mean no disease. For example, we have a normal CBCM patient as a lymphoma. You have a normal CBC patient as a myeloma. So it doesn't rule out a cancer. So please remember that the test that you do will only give you values pertaining to whether that organ or thing is affected. So CBC will only vary if the marrow is affected. If the marrow is unaffected, CBC is not going to show you anything. It will be incidental to the finding of your disease process. So don't expect too much from one report, especially a CBC. All over the world, it has been seen that it has more the clerical faults than the technical faults. For misprints or putting up wrong zeros. One hospital, I got a call saying that the patient's platelet count is 6,300. And the white cell count has come as 79,000. So I said, this must be a great lab. You have to give me a platelet count of 6,300. I said, are you sure it's not 6,345? They have counted each and every platelet. By putting just the reverse happened. The white cell count was 6,300, and the platelet count was 79,000. So just the errors of typing in numbers. So we are happy that interfaces are there so that on the machine directly onto your laptop or computer, it can go on, get a printout, and there will be no errors while putting it. You'll be surprised, there are still some hospitals just still doing this manual method of putting. Okay, and this part is the default system, they're still doing it. It is not a very good situation to be in. I understand there's a cost involved in that. But if you could change over and have an interface which is compatible between two sides, that is nothing to do. And like I said, history and examination are a must. So if a clinician were to pick up the phone, and this is you're living in an ideal world, picks up the phone and says, look, this is the situation, fever, big chills, and you look for malaria, and then you give out a report saying it's malaria. Communication is good. But if there are no details, then it's very hard to give out an interpretation to a report. So you just give out a report. That's left to the clinician to do. That's where all problems start. Along with the CBC, I'm sure you will appreciate that an assessment of peripheral smear is most important. And there's so many things that we can pick up just one by one smear. I'm happy to tell you that at Nayar Hospital where I go, we make smears of all our patients, as all of you do. And we review it and see it and compare it with the CBC report. And it's nice when you don't have to do further investigations. I mean, if you're going to look at a situation where there's iron deficiency anyway, you get a few pencil cells on the smear. You don't need serum ferritin and iron studies and all. You go by the history, you go by the physical examination, you've got nice clapping or color, you have just clapping of the nails or spooning of the nails, that's enough. I don't need ferritin which costs anywhere between 560 to 700 rupees. I don't need that. Good history, a little bit of physical examination, and a nicely stained smear. That's it. Megaloblastic anemia. Macrovellocytes highlighted. You see macrovellocytes, you've got hypersegmented neutrophils, and you've got a history that the person is a vegan or is not taking adequately good intake of green leafy vegetables. And please remember, for a vegetarian, the best source of vitamin B12 is milk. So for those who are not having milk, one of the sources of B12 is lost. So good history will tell me that this is going to be most likely a B12 deficiency. And then when we examine, we see hyperpigmentation of the skin. So if anyone has darkening of the skin below the nails, it is called near the knuckles especially. It's very, very typical of B12 deficiency. So if I have this one smear and this history and this finding, I know it's B12. So in underprivileged areas of patients who do not want to, who don't have the ability to get all the investigations done, this is enough evidence for me to go ahead and give a replacement therapy as a beginner. Sometimes I write provisional treatment because I don't have all answers. This is a surmise. It's a clinical surmise that this is a B12 or iron deficiency. So I started my provisional therapy, and if they respond, brilliant. If they don't, then I say, look, we tried, now let's get the investigations done. Okay. Sometimes we have severe neutropenia, granulocytosis. Tells us that that is the cause of fever. Other people are investigating for fever with dengue, leptospira, hantavirus, malaria, typhoid, giving all kinds of stuff, and actually the problem is in the bone marrow. In such situation, we have to give GCSF, pegfilgrastim, to increase the white cell count. So a major therapeutic decision can be made. It can be life-saving. Because granulocytosis, I have written a chapter for it in Manual of Medical Therapy. It can be a life-threatening situation. If you don't bring up the neutrophils fast, he's dead. So seeing a peripheral smear and not seeing neutrophils is enough for me to give GCSF. Very important. If there is sepsis with leukorrhea, if there is a patient admitted in the ICU, moribund, 3-organ involvement, kidney is failing, lungs, ventilator, and you want to know what is happening on that. You see the peripheral smear, you see that there is a shift to left. There are myelocytes, metamyelocytes, band forms, they look toxic. You know that there is an ongoing sepsis process. Heavier antibiotics might be added on. Need of inotropic support, maybe more. Discussion with the family changes. They look, there is a problem, it appears to be serious, it is septicemia, it's life-threatening. One smear can give you that information. I'm sure you can appreciate the cells here. And I mean, for your child's play, there are spherocytes over here, and this patient has a hereditary spherocytosis. One smear, patient comes to you with mother saying that this child keeps getting jaundice once in a while, and I noticed that since he is 5 years of age. And then along the way, as the child is growing up, someone does a sonography because he had fever, and there is splenomegaly. So, intermittent history of jaundice, mild splenomegaly, you look at the peripheral smear, you can put everything together and say this is most likely hereditary spherocytosis. What is the importance? You do a splenectomy, the child will be well. A major therapeutic decision can be taken on one smear. However, if you have the same kind of picture where there are spherocytes again, I don't know if you can appreciate it very well, but there are spherocytes, but with nucleated red cells and there is polychromasia. This we can't call it as hereditary spherocytosis. Then we have to start thinking of something which is hemolytic in nature. So the next test that you perform is a diagnosis test. So this helps you to streamline your thought process. You say, okay, let's do a DCT. DCT comes positive, you diagnose as an EIJ. Don't give this man or woman blood transfusion, give steroids. A major therapeutic decision. If you give blood transfusion, A, you might not get blood. B, you might get a hemolytic reaction, which could be life-threatening. So smear can take it. Then you can tell them that, look, in this situation again where there are nuclear RBCs, there's something here which is like a sickle cell. So you can tell the clinician that why do you do hemoglobin electrophoresis? This patient looks like a sickle cell anemia, and see whether he's fitting into that. And sometimes they come with multi-system organ involvement with sepsis, and no one knows what is happening. It's actually sickle cell anemia. So to establish a diagnosis, an automated CBC is good. Good peripheral smear and its interpretation is equally important. This is a boy who came to me with a hemoglobin, this one. He came to me with a hemoglobin of 4.5. Actually, this field is not very representative, but this is a case, 4.5. And just about 3 months ago, when he had gone for his health checkup, his hemoglobin was 14.2. He comes from a Muslim community, and he had fever about 7 days ago. Oral medications were given to him, and then he started feeling very weak. CBC was done, it showed a hemoglobin of 4 point something. Platelets and white cells were quite okay. And a smear was made. In the meanwhile, one question I asked him was, what's the color of your urine? He said, why? I said, no, is it like thumbs up or Coca-Cola? Dark colored. He said, yeah, it was. But 2 days ago, today it's clear. So the obvious thing from history and this thing is that he has had a hemolytic episode. Now the issue is what? It was fever, so is it going to be malaria with black water fever? Or is it going to be a drug-induced problem? That means G6PD comes from that community. So knowing the history of that community, the black colored urine, all this makes a lot of difference. When you look at the smear, I'm sure you can appreciate this cell here. It's a blister cell. Can you see it? It's a blister cell. Now this blister cell is going to be